Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State, sponsored once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio. We're on the road today, and today on Patriot Radio, war with Iran. And what's really happening behind the scenes is a flurry of news stories coming in even as we're recording this broadcast. So for most of you, you may seem a little unsettled or feel a little unsettled, and that's a perfect time for prayer. So please go to the QR code in the link, patriotradio.us/prayer, and we would love to pray with you through this whole situation that is happening in the world. Also, you can follow us with real-time intelligence updates and analysis and breaking news at patriotradio.us/telegram. Please share that with your friends and family so that you can have the most up-to-date information, especially regarding the subject that we're about to talk with you today. It is potential nuclear bombs that Iran has, and would they and could they detonate them? Also, it's an important time to understand the supply chain. What happens if there is a nuclear detonation, or if the United States does go to war and maybe there's terror attacks inside the United States? What does your supply chain look like? Well, a vertically integrated supply chain is the best way. In other words, a supply chain that is grown, sourced, processed, produced, and then distributed right here in the United States and is not imported from anywhere else. And there is a solution for that called Patriots Buying American. So if you're interested, please go to the link there on your screen. And that brings us now today to your wisdom from the Word. This word is coming to us from an Apocrypha. It's an additional book, but that was prophetic, written around 200 AD. At least that's the earliest that it can be dated back to. Might be even earlier than that. Some people say to 100 AD. And it's called 2nd Esdras. It was included in the 1611 King James Version of the Bible as an Apocrypha. And the reason is because it had a prophecy in it called the Dragon Nations of Arabia that would arise. Now, this is written in 200 AD. The Dragon Nations of Arabia rose in 632 with Islam. And so for most of church history, the church believed that the Dragon Nations of Arabia were Islam because of this prophecy. But if we back up in the prophecy to chapter 5, we find in the first few verses specifically that there is a sentence, and if you miss it, you can probably read over it, but it's in verse 3, and it says this: "And the land that thou seest now to have root shalt thou see wasted suddenly." In other words, Persia will be laid waste. But it's also interesting what happens prior to that the land will be barren of faith, that there will be essentially an apostasy, and that a lot of people will not have the right grounded faith. It says, quote, "But iniquity shall be increased above that which now thou seest, or that thou hast heard long ago." In other words, sin will also increase in the land. That is what we're seeing in the Middle East right now. And the fact that there is a prophecy about Persia being laid waste, I think we should all pay attention to. In addition to that, the prophecy continues with a couple of other kind of weird things. It says this: nations will be troubled. The air will be changed. That's only in some manuscripts. And then it says something very interesting. Fire will rain down. Does that mean a nuclear war, or does that mean the missile showers that we are seeing right now in the Middle East being traded between Israel and Iran? Either way, it should not change what we should do, and that is to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and the peace over Israel, and as well the peace of the United States. And that brings us now to the globalist front. Coming to us, technocracy news. The AI arms race could destroy humanity.
Make progress on the global agenda.
Coming to us, technocracy news. The AI arms race could destroy humanity. In other words, there is too much focus on profit and power and almost none on safety regarding AI. Let me put this into practical terms. Drones that have your facial recognition already programmed into them, your gait, and also your DNA profile could be used to target human beings. Or what if AI decides to learn and comes to the conclusion that some extremists have come to, that humans shouldn't exist at all, like we saw with the bomber down there in California? Anti-mortalist or pre-mortalist or whatever. These guys believe they should never have been born without consent. The fact is, they were. And so the only way for people to be unborn is for people to kill them. And so AI having almost no focus on safety right now should raise the concerns of everybody. And it's something that, well, the Trump administration and more should address very soon. Also, the Pope has come out with a fury. Pope Leo is outraged by the massacre of refugees sheltered by a local Catholic mission in Nigeria. 200 Nigerian Christians 3 days ago were massacred, and the mainstream media barely wrote about it. They were massacred by Islamist Fulani militias. Now, they say Islamist. These are jihadis. These are people who believe in the command of the Quran to kill Christians and Jews. And if you read the Muslim Brotherhood's actual credo, it says that their spirit is jihad. In other words, according to the Reliance of the Traveler, the foremost Sunni law book, which defines jihad as warfare against non-Muslims, their spirit is warfare against non-Muslims, or who are non-Muslims, again, Christians and Jews. So their spirit is warfare against Christians. Their spirit is warfare against Christ. Their spirit is Antichrist in their very own words. And the Pope is rightly calling them out. That brings us now to the China front. Now, with the China front, and before I get to anything else, it is very important to understand the context of what is happening in the Middle East and what President Trump is doing. First of all, as you've heard me say on this show, 5 years ago, that it would be a war with Russia and Ukraine, then it would be a war between Israel and Iran, and then it would be a war between China and Taiwan, and very likely the United States. How did I know that? What prompted me to know that those things would happen and happen in that order? Part of it is strategic. With Trump in office, the Chinese understand that they have a real leader in America right now, that they cannot bully, that they cannot confuse, that they cannot deceive. And so they understand that Trump means business. And part of what's happening in the Middle East right now is peace through strength, is Trump flexing muscles so that there is no World War III. And I think people are missing this. So right now, Trump has introduced tariffs to deprive China of the economic ability to wage war against Taiwan. Iran, a big supplier of gas and oil to China, if they suddenly become a Western-friendly power, Trump has also then, well, very clearly deprived them of the ability to continue to wage war or even have enough fuel to wage war for more than a few weeks. In addition to that, if Iran is a Western-friendly power, it is also on the southern border of Russia. Now, people will say, well, it's not on the southern border. It's Kazakhstan, all these other things. Well, we will look at this map here in a little bit, but if you look at the map, actually, the Caspian Sea is what's between Iran and Russia. So the Russians fear powers on their western border as much as they fear powers on their southern border that they don't control. That's why they've been involved in Georgia. That's why they've been infiltrating Georgia politics. So what Trump is doing is actually preventing a world war. And we also know that Iran has given Shahed drones to Russia. So the question is, what was the quid pro quo? What did they get in return? Did they get technology to put nuclear warheads on missiles? Or did that come from China? And either way, depriving Russia of another source of drones is a good thing. Depriving China of oil and gas is a good thing to prevent the Chinese ambitions. And I would not be surprised if in the near future, we didn't learn that there was intelligence that China was actually planning to do an invasion of Taiwan this fall. As you've heard me say, this fall, the tides between September and October are the most optimal to invade the very difficult island of Taiwan. One side is sheer cliffs. The other side is a mile of shallow waters. So this makes sense in many respects as to why Trump is doing this right now. But let's add a couple other reasons. The first is that the Iranians have constantly chanted death to America and death to Israel, and they mean it. How do I know they mean it? Because 283 Marines were bombed in Beirut, Lebanon. That's how I know. But in addition to that, they've infiltrated Hezbollah terror cells and Unit 910, into the United States. Why would they do that if they were a friend? Why would they do that if they didn't really have ambition? The fact is, they are 12er Jafari school believers. The Ayatollahs specifically. They believe that when they destroy Israel, that the 12th Imam will come. Now, the whole story behind the 12th Imam is very, very weird. An Imam, young boy, drowned in a well in Qom, Iran. That's QOM, for those of you looking it up on the map. Drowned in Qom, Iran. And the legend is that the 12th Imam will come out of this well. In fact, they built a highway from Qom, Iran to Tehran. Will come out of this well at the last days. So they believe when they destroy Israel, and notice I say, not if, when they destroy Israel, that's how they believe that this will happen. Well, Israel is been protected by God. There's been many, many, many testimonies, even from Arab sources, of miracles in battles that Israel has fought, where even Arab sources have said, God must be protecting Israel. So we have this happening there. We should take them at their word. So to remove nuclear weapons from a 12er Jafari school Ayatollah is also a good thing. And it is in the interest of the United States of America because they always call us the Great Satan, and they have always threatened to attack the United States. In fact, Iran has been at war ever since this Islamic revolution overthrew the Shah. They've been at war with the United States, just the United States hasn't ever really recognized it. So, that said, and with that context, we're going to move into the rest of the China front. China is stockpiling nuclear weapons at record speed to challenge the United States. China's nuclear stockpile is hitting 600 warheads, the fastest buildup among nuclear powers in recent years. And Israel is ramping up strikes on Iran in the nuclear and missile sites, escalating regional tensions. China very likely wanted to weigh in on this, but has not been able to because if they do, it could deprive them of their ability to invade Taiwan. Also, there have been arrests of Chinese scientists, as I mentioned on the last show, in Michigan that had been smuggling a fungus described as a potential agro-terrorism weapon. After deboarding the international flight in Detroit in July 2024, this is when they were busted. So it's been over a year since this incident has actually happened. And the question is, what's happened since to prevent this kind of smuggling into the United States of America? But even if we take some of what the Biden administration said at face value, and I really don't normally, it would raise a question: could there be other biological warfare agents already in the United States being prepared or have already been released against the United States that could destroy the wheat crop or the potato crop or other agriculture here? And the answer is we don't really know. And that should have everyone asking their congressman, what are you going to do about it? Also, coming to us from the Epoch Times, the Chinese Communist Party approaches its fourth plenum, a key internal meeting. Well, party top leadership looks like it's maybe going to replace Xi Jinping, or at least there's a lot of infighting. Chinese leader Xi Jinping is grappling with an unprecedented power crisis marked by unusual absences and the sidelining of his key allies, signaling a potential shift in China's political landscape. Xi vanished from public view for 2 weeks from May 21st to June 3rd, an unusual hiatus for the CCP leader. And prior to that, during Xi's inspection in Henan province from May 19th to the 20th, the first ranking member of the CCP's Politburo, Kai Qi, was absent as well, which is a departure from normal CCP protocols. And we've heard this over the last year, especially the sacking and purging of generals, that Xi may be in a power struggle. And also based on the fact that there was a fairly quick conclusion to tariff negotiations, that also is an indicator that he may be losing favor and influence. In addition to that, something that we talked about here on Patriot Radio back in 2020 and 2021, we brought up the issue that the Chinese interfered in the U.S. election in 2020, and now FBI Director Kash Patel has located documents which detail alarming allegations related to the 2020 elections. They're moving to immediately declassify these. The FBI has located these documents and turned them over to the Senate Committee Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley, whose committee has oversight over the Justice Department. So this is interesting, but in a statement to Just the News, Patel said the documents include allegations of plans from the CCP to manufacture fake driver's licenses and ship them into the United States for the purpose of facilitating fraudulent mail-in ballots. Allegations which, while substantiated, were abruptly recalled and never disclosed to the public. In fact, a next article from Ezra Cohen very specifically talks about just wait till the American people get the full story on the concentrated effort across multiple IC agencies to suppress information related to CCP interference in the election to Biden's benefit. Who was the ringleader? A great question. There was multiple evidence that I saw with my own eyes of CCP interference in the elections in 2020. Many pundits, many people talked about this. It was swept under the rug. Now it's time to see if the statement from a Chinese intellectual leader that the way to attack America was through its elections actually indeed happened in 2020. Also, Israel's Iran operation reveals the danger China's multi-domain infiltration has pre-positioned assets throughout U.S. infrastructure. So this is talking about the drone attack inside of Iran. It also happened in Russia as well from the Ukrainians. How vulnerable are we here in the U.S. homeland? Not just talking about cyber infiltration into networks and critical infrastructure in the United States, but what about drones being pre-positioned near airfields, say on Chinese-owned property? That's why it's so important that the Chinese-owned property is divested as soon as possible and that the Chinese are banned from owning property inside the United States, because that could be staging areas for an attack on U.S. military bases. Also, Taiwan signs a major deal with a drone software provider. They signed a deal Tuesday with Aterion for drone software, which is the same technology extensively used in Ukrainian drones in the war with Russia. The deal, which is being called a strategic partnership, will see the research and development arm of Taiwan's defense ministry work directly with Aterion to further develop technology related to drone swarms. What we're bringing to the table has been combat proven in Ukraine to deter aggression and destroy tanks, naval assets, and other really expensive equipment. This is a very clear signal from Taiwan. They mean business regarding drones and next-generation warfare to deter China and Chinese aggression. When we come back from the break, a huge day on the Middle East front.
Attention business owners and entrepreneurs. Patriot TV is launching a brand new TV series showcasing American-made products, and your business could be featured. Whether you sell your products online on Etsy or Shopify and dream of reaching millions of viewers on smart TVs like Samsung, Sony, TCL, and LG, or apps like Roku, Android, and Apple TV, this is your chance. We're searching for US-based businesses offering all types of products and services proudly made in the USA. If you've ever wanted to showcase your products on TV like QVC or the Home Shopping Network, now's your opportunity. Support our American economy, grow your business, and be seen by loyal Patriot viewers across the country. Know someone with a business or have a business yourself? Don't miss out. Contact us at supportingpatriots.com today. Be a guest on this new exciting TV series. Let's put your American-made products in the spotlight.
The new Supporting Patriots show on Patriot TV spotlights great Patriot-owned companies and introduces them to Patriot consumers, encouraging them to buy American-made. If you're an America-loving patriot that owns and operates his or her own business, and you have Made in America products or services, you're the perfect candidate to be interviewed on the Supporting Patriots show. If you'd like to be considered for an interview, email us at supportingpatriots@patriot.tv.
And we're back with the Middle East front. President Trump posted today a couple of very startling Truth Social posts. Quote, "We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He is an easy target, but is safe there. We're not going to take him out, at least not for now." He followed that post with 2 words, all caps, unconditional surrender. Now, very quick analysis on this. It is great to see a U.S. president finally give a very clear goal and objective for any war. That's number one. Number two, if there is going to be a declaration of war, there should be a debate in Congress, according to the Constitution. Number three, who would Iran surrender to? That would be an important point. Does he mean to the United States? And is that a signal that the United States is about to attack Iran? Many people think so. And there's not just that. Tonight, Israeli leadership held a meeting that was the longest since the war began. Netanyahu also spoke with President Trump. The meeting was a couple of hours at least. And Israeli media reports that the U.S. is likely to join the war against Iran tonight. In addition to that, there are indications that the United States will strike Iran soon, according to Western sources who spoke with Khan News. Now, before we get to the threat from Iran and what Iran actually said, I think this is another important point. Iran had enough enriched uranium to create nuclear bombs, okay? The technological know-how, that's something a little bit different. It takes a lot more technological know-how to put those bombs on a missile, but it could be carried on a truck as long as they had the triggering mechanisms and some other things as well. So the question right now is, does Iran actually have a functional nuclear bomb, or what they think might be a functional nuclear bomb, and that's why they're not surrendering? I think that's a very good question, and some people have been asking that here recently. This is also interesting for the context of Iran issuing a global threat. Quote, "Tonight, a great surprise will occur, one that the world will remember for centuries," end quote. Now, normally, if they're going to do something, they actually don't brag about it ahead of time. But when they do, it's usually just bluster for the sake of trying to increase the morale or trying to gin something up. So this statement, many people have been alarmed because it was followed up with this video from the Iranian regime's official account where a man is stroking a nuclear bomb. Now, another question is, have the Iranians infiltrated something into the United States of America? Are they trying to plan an October 7th style attack or a 9/11 style attack here in the United States of America as retribution for attempting to take out the Ayatollah and overturn the regime in Iran? I don't know. But everyone's threat posture should be increased dramatically. The Iranians were always thought of as the A team. The other jihadis, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, kind of the B team in the terror networks in the world. So this is something that we should take very seriously. Now, the Iranians would underestimate America by thinking that there's not going to be enough guns here to stop them, or else maybe they just don't care. Either way, get trained, exercise your Second Amendment right. It might just be you that stops a terror attack here in the United States homeland. Also, if they do have a nuclear weapon, very likely it would be limited to the Middle East. Could they put it on a truck and drive it somewhere with a suicide bomber? Of course they could. There are so many things on the table right now, and we're going to get into that from a couple of very good sources here in a minute. It looks like there has been a soft blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. And as I've been kind of watching these things happen, the Strait of Hormuz is a critical place for oil to go through. You have a lot of the Emirates there, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, Oman. And so the Strait of Hormuz, very strategic, and Qatar Energy has instructed its liquid natural gas vessels not to enter the Persian Gulf and to stay outside of the Strait of Hormuz until the day before they are supposed to load their vessels for security reasons. That really does seem like a soft blockade. In addition to that, Peter Tershwell, the VP for Maritime and Trade at S&P, said some shipping firms are beginning to shy away from the region due to new risks. Speaking to CNBC, he said ocean carriers have no plans to go back en masse into the Red Sea, and so the very threat of military activity around a narrow, important routing like the Strait of Hormuz is going to be enough to significantly disrupt shipping. Continued circumstances and risk tolerance varied widely across shipping owners. It appears that most shipping owners currently chose to proceed, while some seem to stay away. BIMCO head of security Jacob Larson told CNBC as well. This does look like there is going to be an impact. Approximately 25 to 35% of global oil travels through the Strait of Hormuz, and freight rates have increased 20 to 30% since Israel and Iran began attacks on each other this last week. That gets us to a Kuwaiti newspaper detailing 4 failed attempts made against the Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's residence and office in Tehran using suicide drones since last Friday. Launched from within the capital, that's key right there. Again, drones coming from inside of Iran, very likely from Mossad. The drones were intercepted by Iranian air defenses. So, it does look like the Ayatollah is on the table as far as a decapitation strike. And if that happens, then that could be the trigger for sleeper cells inside the United States to awake and begin terror attacks wherever they are, because that has always been thought of as the likely response if the Ayatollah was assassinated. Why would they do that? Because they would have nothing left to really fight for if he's gone. And also the need for revenge for the killing of a figure like that, especially in Shia Islam. All U.S. Navy, and this is where we get into the rest of this. These are indicators is something very big is going to happen in the next 24 to 48 hours. And it's not just people saying it out there. These are objective indicators that something very big is happening. We're going to go through these very specifically and get some detailed points from several sources so that you understand the situation and that you can be prepared as well if a broader war breaks out in the Middle East and the U.S. attacks. All U.S. Navy and Allied ships have been put to sea from naval support activity Bahrain on the coast of the Persian Gulf. I have heard that other ships have as well been put out to sea. In addition to that, the United States has placed its forces on high alert across the UAE, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, according to the New York Times. And the United Kingdom has started to send additional military assets to the Middle East. Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, warned Iran's supreme leader to, quote, remember what happened to Saddam Hussein. He said Khamenei should be careful not to commit further war crimes or attack Israeli civilians with missiles, adding that Saddam made the same mistakes against Israel and was eventually removed and executed. Those are the threats going back and forth. Some objective things happening. We're going to get to more of those details here in a second when we get back from the break.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
What do a neurosurgeon, a country artist, and a television and radio host have in common? They all saw the writing on the wall. Big banks sharing your financial information with big government. Join them as owners in Old Glory Bank, the pro-America online bank that protects your privacy, security, and liberty. Invest today at own.oldglorybank.com.
And we're back with more from the Middle East front. So here is the question. Does Iran have a nuclear bomb or multiple nuclear bombs? American Kinetics came out with a report today, Iran's nuclear-armed ICBMs and U.S. response indicators. The report evaluates newly corroborated intelligence indicating Iran possesses 8 to 10 nuclear-armed ICBMs, in other words, intercontinental ballistic missiles, capable of striking the United Kingdom. It assesses activity within the U.S. National Security Council, foreign military movements, signs of battle space preparation, and potential domestic political constraints. Strategic context includes growing resistance to Israeli support in Congress and China's influence over U.S. legislators. A multi-day emergency NSC presence, coordinated allied force movements, and synchronized media disclosures suggest the U.S. is preparing for imminent kinetic action against Iran. Public narrative management and defense posture realignment signal high probability of a preemptive strike within 24 to 48 hours. Despite a clear threat escalation, internal division, and foreign influence are undermining a unified response inside the Trump administration. And that is what Trump has been facing. People that are supported by China, either secretly or overtly, doesn't even matter, but also that these NSC officials have maintained this uninterrupted presence at the White House signals that something very, very big is being planned and very big is being decided. Fox News interview disclosing Iran's nuclear ICBM capability did appear in the last 24 hours. That it does appear to be a very strategic release. Again, I would raise the question, what if it's not on an ICBM? What if they just have truck-mounted bombs that can be driven into Iraq or toward U.S. bases in that part of the world? No one's really been talking about that. Also interesting that the most likely course of action and most dangerous course of action here are a little bit too close for comfort. If the United States knows where those nuclear bombs are, and of course it would take action and hit them as fast and as soon as possible. But if they don't, it could be an indicator why Trump said for everyone in Tehran to evacuate. That potentially Tehran would be a target of U.S. retaliation if a nuclear bomb was detonated against U.S. forces or against U.S. naval assets in the region. So, most dangerous course of action here is Iran retaliating with an attempted nuclear launch or a nuclear detonation toward a U.S. base. Yes, we're actually talking about this, and this is how high on the radar screen it is right now, no pun intended. This is the reality that we're facing, and the way that President Trump is acting at least indicates to me that the intelligence he has is extremely credible, extremely reliable, and is driving the decision to take out the threat before U.S. forces are attacked in the region. Which prompts us to move to what happens after the regime in Iran is removed. And as I said a few days ago, watch for Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi to become more prominent, which he did today. In a full speech, he said that the Islamic Republic has reached its end and is in the process of collapsing. Khamenei, like a frightened rat, has gone into hiding underground, has lost control of the situation. What has begun is irreversible. The future is bright, and together we will pass through this sharp turn in history. Then he says this: the regime's apparatus of repression is falling apart. All it takes now is a nationwide uprising to put an end to this nightmare once and for all. Now is the time to rise, time to reclaim Iran. Then he addresses the military, law enforcement, and security forces and state employees, quote, many of whom have been sending me messages in recent days, end quote. In other words, he is in contact with leaders in Iran right now. That is a significant indicator, as well as Javier Milei putting out a post today that showed leaders he supports: Trump in the United States, Modi in India, and Reza Pahlavi in Iran, Netanyahu in Israel. So Argentina very clearly aligning today. Also an interesting comment in response to a question by OSINT 613. Now, a lot of the OSINT community asks these questions, but when you have someone like Sarah Adams, a former CIA targeter, very well known, very well respected, respond, people should listen. Here was the question: I honestly can't understand why Iran hasn't surrendered yet. I can't wrap my head around it. It doesn't click. And then Sarah Adams responded, they likely are going to first see if their nukes work. That is an ominous response. Is Washington preparing for war? U.S. Air Force purportedly sends out 2 mysterious encrypted nuclear emergency codes. Now, a community note on Twitter said, these are routine. These were not routine. And that was a ridiculous note to put out there. The fact that 2 mysterious encrypted notes, the first one smaller, the second one larger, were sent out means that something had been activated. And that's not just speculation. In addition to that, there is a major flow of U.S. Air Force aerial refueling tankers to the Middle East, which continued just this afternoon, with many operating at altitudes to tow along fighters. And fighters have been reportedly seen with those refueling tankers. Now, the United States has more refueling tankers than all the rest of the world combined. So the fact that maybe 10, 15% are moved in the Middle East is not that big a deal as far as force posture is concerned. But it just, again, is an indicator that something is being prepared for right now. Also, Another indicator coming to us from AX Actual of a U.S. strike on Iranian nuclear bunkers. First of all, a U.S. WC-135 Constant Phoenix nuclear sniffer was launched from Offutt Air Force Base on standby to detect fallout. Yes, from a nuclear weapon. A B-1B Lancer bomber, currently airborne and visible, is deliberate signaling that we are on a war footing. In addition to that, Trump and the Secretary of State abruptly left the G7 for D.C. and convened the National Security Council immediately upon their arrival. So, what would be the main target of a strike from the United States besides any extant nuclear weapons that the U.S. knew the locations of? It would be the nuclear site at Fordo, which is buried deep inside a mountain, and that is one of the reasons that there are B-52 bombers in Diego Garcia, is to take out something like that with bunker busters. So if we see it coming, it would be that. If that's what in fact is going to happen. Now, Trump may be trying to do negotiation behind the scenes, but he's made several public statements that essentially negotiations are over until there's unconditional surrender by the Ayatollah. In addition to that, Iran reports a cyber attack has crippled a major state-owned bank. The Israelis hacked into that and then started to drain accounts from the IRGC, so literally leaving them with no money and no ability to continue to fight. Also, Iran media reported widespread internet disruptions as well today, not just in the banking sector, but across the whole country. Reports now suggest that Israeli strikes earlier in the eastern outskirts of the Iranian capital of Tehran may have targeted a aerospace complex in the southeast of the city near the village of Hyderabad, which is known to be one of the largest sites manufacturing ballistic missiles. So the Israelis continuing to take out ballistic missile sites in that region. In addition to that, reports of airstrikes near Imam Hussein University and the IRGC headquarters in Tehran, and there is smoke rising from those places. This looks like a very comprehensive set of targets the Israelis are just systematically taking out. This missile production complex southeast of Tehran was hit, triggering a massive fire as well with what looks like a secondary explosion from the photographs that I've seen. U.S. State Department, now pay attention to this because this likely means that this will be an extended conflict. This might not end in days. This actually might be drawn out. However, if they take out the Ayatollah, then obviously this would be measured in days. The U.S. State Department has established a Middle East task force to help coordinate support for U.S. citizens, diplomatic missions, and personnel amid the conflict between Israel and Iran. The task force is intended to help ensure the State Department and American citizens get the information they need. Tammy Bruce, a spokesman, added. So, this is setting up a communication mechanism for what would very likely be a protracted war. So, this might be just preparation, but this also could be an indicator that they think this is going to extend beyond just the 2-week time frame. From Bloomberg, a source close to the Kremlin says Iran has not asked for Russia's help, and Moscow has no plans to offer any. Whether that's true or not, there are several reports of high-ranking Iranian officials and their families fleeing to Russia. I suspect it'll take a couple of weeks to sort that out and actually get some accurate information on this. Also, the idea that this is regime change in Iran probably needs to be challenged because the original regime in Iran, it was unfortunately undermined by Carter and then overthrown by the Islamic Revolution to the United States' detriment, was the Shah of Iran. There was an Iran before Khomeini, and it was very much a Western ally and very close to the West. Also, an interesting and very powerful text message sent by Ambassador Mike Huckabee to President Trump this morning that President Trump published. I want to read it in full. It is such a powerful thing, and to know that there are men of this kind of character, decision-making positions, should be encouraging to all of us. Quote, Mr. President, God spared you in Butler, PA, to be the most consequential president in a century. Maybe ever. The decisions on your shoulders I would not want to be made by anyone else. You have many voice is speaking to you, sir, but there is only one voice that matters. His voice. I am your appointed servant in this land and am available for you, but I do not try to get in your presence, often because I trust your instincts. No president in my lifetime has been in a position like yours. Not since Truman in 1945. I don't reach out to persuade you, only to encourage you. I believe you will hear from heaven, and that voice is far more important than mine or anyone else's. You sent me to Israel to be your eyes, ears, and voice, and to make sure our flag flies above our embassy. My job is to be the last one to leave. I will not abandon this post. Our flag will not come down. You did not seek this moment. This moment sought you. It is my honor to serve you, Mike Huckabee. End quote. What a fantastic text to send to the president, not asking for anything, just being there for a man, human like all of us. One of the greatest crises of our time. When we come back from the break, more from the Russia front, and also some interesting developments here on the home front.
American business owners, you understand the power of TV. If you have a product that you want to sell to millions of like-minded Americans who value quality, hard work, and supporting the red, white, and blue, Supporting Patriots is the perfect place. If you're ready to bring your product to a patriotic audience eager to buy American, then contact us today at supportingpatriots.com and secure your spot on Supporting Patriots. Let's build a stronger economy. When we buy American, we support our future.
I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle, about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
You know, if I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe, but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep. It's filling up more energy, more get up and go. And it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.
And we're back with the Russia front. Last night, Russia launched one of the most massive attacks since the start of the full-scale invasion. Over 440 drones and 32 missiles in Kiev. A missile tore through a residential building. Entire sections collapsed. Families were buried. 14 killed, 60 wounded, and 5 still missing. These attacks continue as Ukraine strikes Russian critical infrastructure and manufacturing, depriving it of the ability to wage war. Russians continue to strike into Ukraine, and it does unfortunately look like this is going to continue for the near future. That brings us to, what does Russia really fear? On its southern border, here you can see on this map, Iran, so Turkmenistan just to the north, and you have that whole area of Armenia and Azerbaijan and Georgia. But then you see above that, right there where the Caspian Sea, you see Russia and key places in Russia, like Rostov-on-Don and Volgograd. So Volgograd, very strategic place, because that is where forces are marshaled for the Ukraine invasion, at least one of the places. So with the Caspian Sea there, Russia obviously would not want a Western-friendly Iran right below it that would be within that close of striking distance, and especially if it was a close U.S. ally. President Trump will have lunch tomorrow with the Chief of Army Staff, Field Marshal Syed Asim Munir of Pakistan. So Trump's having lunch with Pakistani Chief of Staff tomorrow. I suspect that may not happen. Key member of Trump's administration was hospitalized today. Kristi Noem was taken to the hospital for an allergic reaction. Looks like she is better already and will be released pending some further evaluation. Trump reports that He is reversing the ICE guidance to stop raids in agriculture, hotel, and restaurant industries after some backlash from the MAGA base. President Trump has reportedly reversed guidance issued to Immigrations and Customs Enforcement that would halt deportation operations against illegal agriculture, restaurant, and hotel workers in a move consistent with his promise to execute mass deportations. The Gateway Pundit reported that Trump administration issued guidance to regionalized officials to halt the operations in these sectors. And it says, quote, effective today, please hold on all worksite enforcement investigations operations on agriculture, restaurants, and operating hotels, end quote. Then this has been reversed. And I hope that this is indeed true, that Trump is holding to his promise regardless of what the sector is. Also, a former military officer and FEMA official is charged with gruesome threats against President Trump, a former Coast Guard lieutenant. Insert the jokes for those of us from the Army or the Marines, who was awarded honors for his sharpshooter skills, has been arrested and charged with making threats to kill President Trump. A 19-page Federal Bureau of Investigation affidavit said that Peter Stinson of Virginia, who left the Coast Guard in 2021 after 33 years and was a Federal Emergency Management Agency instructor, issued repeated threats aimed at Trump, according to CBS. So the threats continue. Also, Trump-hating agitator was shot in the eye after thugs violently assaulted police officers during No King riot in Los Angeles. A man so blinded by his hatred of the president now may end up losing part of his vision permanently after some of his comrades got physical with cops on Saturday in Los Angeles. So the violent leftists continue to wage war across America, and they're not going to be stopped until the IRS and the FBI investigate this, break up these funding networks, and hold accountable those at the highest level that have been funding them. And I think people are going to be surprised at the politicians who actually have been the ground commanders and coordinators for these Marxist groups like Antifa. So, former Coast Guard officer arrested. Interesting. We forget where the 8647 comes from. Because the guy who threatened President Trump's life using the 8647 language was an exact copycat of former law enforcement, and former Director Comey's destructive Instagram debacle. In other words, Director Comey was the first one to use this, and now somebody who was actively threatening the president's life was using it as well. It's not a coincidence. People need to be held accountable. They need to be tried, and they need to be thrown in prison. And I pray that the political will is there to make that happen. There will be more incoming federal charges against violent Portland Antifa members. 2 were charged today. Joshua Ames Cotretti, I think is how you say it, 46, was among the first 2 Antifa militants to be federally charged for allegedly violently rioting outside an ICE government building. On June 14th, after the No Kings protest, he was part of a mob that rioted. He used the alias Zero in Antifa. So he's been charged with assault. Federal officer. Again, he is innocent until proven guilty. All right. Love thy neighbors plus shoot ICE agents, quote unquote. Antifa has been writing death threats all over Portland ICE facility while attacking it and setting it on fire. The 3 arrows symbol that was also found there is used by Antifa to mark their presence, similar to violent traditional gangs. So Antifa continues to ramp up, and I expect this to continue over the summer. I think, though, they're going to go to more targeted attacks, similar to what was seen in Minnesota, similar to what was seen with the United Healthcare CEO. They're going to go to targeted attacks against property, Christians, Patriot leaders, and they're going to specifically target individuals when they have opportunity. This is something that you will see ramp up. The American people, though, has had enough. Attorney General Ken Paxton down in Texas said he's opening investigations into 33 non-citizens for illegally voting in the 2024 election. Non-citizens must not be allowed to influence American elections, and I will use the full weight of my office to investigate all voter fraud. And just like Laura Logan said, it should be happening in every state. I could not agree more. Also, Mike Lindell vindicated. Landmark defamation trial. His press release took the fight all the way to the jury trial and was overwhelmingly cleared of wrongdoing. Congratulations, Mike Lindell and MyPillow. Also, on other news, Trump blocked the Biden-era plan to remove Snake River dams. Everybody in Washington State and Oregon should be happy about that, and he may have prevented an ecological disaster. I could not agree more, because the river would not have been ready for that. And at a time when we need electrical generation, that really would have been not very smart. Just months after HHS Gov and US FDA announced it will phase out petroleum-based synthetic dyes from the nation's food supply, Kraft has committed to remove all artificial dyes from its food by end of 2027 voluntarily. And lastly, major divergence in gold and silver. Silver is shooting up, as you can see by this graph here. And you can also see the main beneficiary of de-dollarization is gold. You can see the difference there between the dollar and gold continuing to grow. So if you are interested in turning some of your portfolio into gold, or maybe just some cash into gold to hedge against what's happening in war in the future, you can always visit patriotradio.com/veritymetals.com. Now, Verity Metals, fantastic organization. We've had Matt Geiger on here many times. If you don't know it, check it out. Their model is, I think, the best in the gold industry. So please, if you're thinking, don't wait. Don't sit on the fence. Check it out. Get some questions answered. But don't wait for this to continue to devolve. And that is the briefing. Remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. And thank you to everybody that has been praying for us during this time. Again, Patriot Radio today on the road, but I needed to record this extremely important episode with everything that is happening in the Middle East right now so that you are in the know, understand the context, understand what's happening, and the likelihood that there is going to be a U.S. strike against Iran here in the very near term, and that there might be retaliation, even here in the U.S. homeland with activated terror sleeper cells, or it could be just limited to overseas with attacks on U.S. bases. Either way, looks like the war in the Middle East is unfortunately expanding. So please, today what you can do is pray for the peace of Jerusalem, for the peace of Israel, for the peace of the United States of America. Also, make sure you're following us on patriotradio.us/telegram for real-time intelligence analysis and breaking news so that you can stay in the know, especially if something happens here in the homeland. You're going to want to know as soon as possible, and you want to have your family prepared as well. So top off on your gas. Pray. And make sure that you remember God is with us in these times. He's put us here exactly for this moment. This is Matt Shea. Thank you for joining me on Patriot Radio today. May God bless all of you. He is making this generation the greatest one. Awakening is here, so keep up the fight.